if a Republican mandate can't cure the ills of the government, it puts us in a tough spot. And it's so sad because I think at this rate, Democrats pick up Congress in November. Well, the people who are most sure and secure in their worldview are atheists. Under 30s aren't very religious, but the ones who are Catholic. Mostly. Protestantism is dying under 30. It's like less than 20% ID. Just the under 40 Trump voters. 3/4 of these people support nationalizing major industries. Almost 60% of them support excess wealth confiscation. They're split roughly 40 to 50% on whether the Trump voters would vote for a Democratic socialist. Conservatives under 40, basically want to give control to an advanced AI because they're so frustrated with the state of the government. I feel like we're in a cold civil war.
What do you think is causing Israel to be such a lightning rod? Hello and welcome to Forge and Anvil, where we hammer out hard conversations to sharpen ourselves for the cultural, political, and spiritual war that we are living in. My name is Connor. I am host of this podcast. It's great to be back after a long hiatus. This is one of two episodes that I am recording. That's kind of an overview. I've been away for a while, so I'm kind of giving us a quick 10,000-foot view of the cultural and political landscape. So that being said, joining me for this episode is Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen. Of course, he's going to be a great guy to help us break down the 10,000-foot view, and we'll try to get a little more detailed beyond that as well. So, Mark, go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience and those who are not yet familiar with you and your work.
So we're pollsters, which means that we basically ask humans questions and then report on the results. And so that kind of makes us journalists. And in the polling industry, there's basically two flavors. There's, hey, who's going to win this election? And we're pretty good at that. We've been perennially among the top pollsters. And then there's, well, what is America thinking and what does that mean? And we do a lot more than that than most people. And, because we're independent, because we're not shilling for either party or for the establishment, we tend to ask uncomfortable questions that are really important. So I think we have our finger on the pulse of America. We kind of see ourselves as like the voters' lobbyists because everybody has a lobbyist except for the American people. Yeah, well said. And of course, I've been consuming your content quite a bit. We follow each other on X, and I really appreciate your posts. Of course, you're now, I think, officially labeled the Black Pillar in Chief. So we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get going. But really, I want to talk a lot about where we're at, where specifically the right is at in America. Of course, it's no surprise that I'm a supporter of the Trump administration, but naturally, I do think that there are some missteps happening right now. You've, of course, been one of the most vocal voices that are trying to approach it from a constructive angle. I wouldn't, despite people calling you a black pillar, I wouldn't say you're blackpilling. You're trying to give constructive feedback. But there's a lot of good things happening. There's a lot of bad things happening. So let's just kind of break it down. But before we do that, let's go back a little bit and talk about when Trump was first in office. Of course, you have been doing polling on Trump's overall approval and just how the American electorate is feeling about all these issues. So talk to us a bit about Trump's positioning going into his first year back into office. Where was he? Yeah. How are the people feeling? So Trump never really had a honeymoon the second time out. I think he maybe peaked at like 54, 55. And it kind of just sort of kicked around in the low 50s, which is pretty good considering how divisive America is now. But this isn't like 20 years ago where everybody got a 60, 70% approval rating like Obama did. And his approval actually went up at the end of February, early March, and it spiked at 55, which is actually incredible for him to actually beat his honeymoon. And it was all because of Doge, all because everybody was like, well, we voted for Trump because we don't trust the federal government. And we were right, because look at all of this stuff that we uncovered. And so since then, it's been mostly downhill, but he's not terrible. He's doing like, 45% approval to 54% disapprove, so underwater 9 points. And that's about where Obama 1 and Obama 2 were at this point in his term. But objectively, I think a lot of people would say, well, he accomplished more this time. Well, yeah, unfortunately, the bar is a lot higher because America's pretty screwed up. It's a lot different America than it was 10 years ago. And I think that in many ways, Trump was like an existential sort of hope and a prayer that we can avoid a messy outcome in America. And what people are telling me, and some of the polling says, is that their problem with Trump isn't that he's doing too much or he's doing things they don't like. It's almost across the board that he's not doing enough of what he promised. We asked that question. It was basically like 40% not doing enough, 20% doing too much. And so in a country that's half Democrat, half insane leftists, for only 20% to say he's like doing too much what he promised, people and the problem is that he kind of has lost focus, in my opinion, of what he needs to be doing. And that is everything needs to be economic populism, restoring the American dream, and brutal government accountability. And he kind of can't stay out of his way. Like even today, I think he's had a lot of really good string of wins over the last week. But even today, he's out there talking about like an immigration reform bill with a path to citizenship. And it's like, okay, that might be all well and good. Maybe that's where we're going. Maybe that's the best thing for America. But people are screaming at you to deport millions of more people, right? And it's like, obviously, your base is going to flip out if they even get a whiff of amnesty. So, like, why do that? Like, why say that at all? So there's been all of these kind of like things just in the last 3 or 4 months where it's like, what is he doing? He doesn't sound like the same person on the stump. And in my opinion, those are when his approval rating really got hit the most. It got hit the most basically when he came out of, Liberation Day, was doing really good in May, and then he bombed Iran. Then he did the One Big Beautiful Bill, like what didn't really look that great, to be honest with you. And then he had the Epstein thing, and then he was fighting about affordability. Then the government shut down. And all of these are things that like are hampering his platform. His platform is more popular than Trump is. Arresting government people, like that's very popular. Like firing everybody in DC, that's very popular. Mass deportation, super popular. Like blowing up narco boats, super popular. Like sending the National Guard into cities, super popular. Like all of this stuff that the media clutches their pearls about. And so my advice to him is like, if Republicans can't govern between now and November 2026, then do the things he can do, which is just like brutally crack down on Democrats and blue states and the government.
Yeah, so you've already mentioned kind of a few different things that were bumps in the road that started dropping Trump's approval. So let's maybe go through some of those. So bombing Iran. Yeah. So obviously, I think it doesn't need to be explained why so many people were concerned about that, because in general, the right-wing base is very non-interventionist. People use isolationist a lot as a slur. Really, I would just say, for the most part, we're just concerned about getting bogged down into another quagmire where we're just sending all of our young blood to go die, and of course, we're sending billions of dollars. Whether it be wars that we're actually a part of, like in the Middle East, or just ones that we're funding to the tune of billions and billions, like in Ukraine. But of course, the bombing of Iran did not actually, as of yet, lead to a serious quagmire. So that being said, so many of the worst fears that were sort of thrown out there did not actually come to fruition. So would you say has it mostly just been a messaging issue on Iran that first dropped it, or has it recovered some since that, when it comes specifically to the foreign policy angle?
Well, so when I look at Trump's approval in right direction polling, and right direction polling has also been very good. It had a little bit hiccup in November and December where it got under 40, but we had our biggest record of 37 consecutive weeks of right direction polling over 40. So people have been very happy with the Trump administration. Again, for right direction to be high and job approval to be lower than you would hope, that means people want him to be more effective. Now, when I look at job approval rating, though, it's hard to like tie moves to specific things that happen. And some of it is also noise. So I will say, though, he was at net +8 on literally the day that Israel bombed Iran. And fast forward to a month later, and he was underwater 4 points. So that's a 12-point drop in net approval. And a couple of things happened during that time period. The One Big Beautiful Bill came out. He was surging National Guard to blue cities for like ICE riots. And the Epstein case closed thing came out. So I can only assume that all of that really like contributed. But when I look at, for instance, what happened in Venezuela with Maduro, that didn't affect his numbers at all. And again, maybe it's just noise, but he's been basically at -9, -10 for the entire last month. And so when we ask more deeper questions specifically about this, we find out, for instance, that nabbing Maduro was popular, like 51-36 or something like that. And yet also people are concerned we will get bogged down there. But I think they trust Trump that it's like, okay, we don't have a history of entanglements in South America. We were in and out. And so this one appears to be like basically a win. It was popular. Bombing Iran and taking out their nuclear program is also popular, but people were freaking out. It's like, oh man, are we doing Israel's bidding? I think was one of the big questions. And so there is something very specifically different about the Middle East. And I think it's because public opinion's turned a lot about Israel, and it's kind of become this like lightning rod of Trump's not putting my priorities first. He's putting other people's priorities first. And so like the volume of people, of nebulous, ephemeral people who are changing their minds here are crossover Democrats and independents and younger voters. And younger voters gave Trump a 60% approval rating in February. It's down to like 40 couple percent now. He lost a lot of these people. They also really do not like Israel. And so I think that in the Middle East specifically, if you stack rank the Middle East boots on the ground versus like defending Ukraine and defending Taiwan, defending Israel comes in lowest. And, I think they're very specifically, it was a popular thing. But even when you spend time and effort on a very popular but also visible thing, you're burning political capital. And so what I would say is that even if these things, he's staying out of these entanglements, it's like, well, what could he be spending his political capital on? And it should be arresting people and firing folks. And yeah, so like Venezuela came and went. We could probably nab Greenland and probably like annex Canada. And Americans would be okay with that, I think, if they were getting arrests, if they were getting investors beaten up on and companies raided and the housing market corrected and jobs returned. And like, we're not getting that. And so it's like, I think people give Trump a lot of leeway, but it's like, well, why aren't you giving us what we need? And oh, by the way, now you're hugging Bibi Netanyahu on New Year's and raiding Iran again. We're going to like do regime change. It's not a good look.
Yeah, there's a lot there to respond to. I think the main thing that I wanted to tackle first is you talked about how the Israel issue seems to be least popular when stacked up against, defending Taiwan from China, or of course, helping Zelensky in Ukraine. I mean, from your perspective as a public pollster, what do you think is causing Israel to be such a lightning rod? Because of course, when it comes to just, Trump's putting someone else's interest first, I mean, at the end of the day, we've given way more money to Zelensky over in Ukraine. So sometimes it does seem as though Israel, for some reason, just gets an outsized, impact on our politics for good or bad. And to me, it doesn't necessarily make sense. I have barely touched the Israel topic. I just don't want to even bother with it. It takes up way more energy on the American right than I think it should. But why do you think that is? You would know much better than me. Why? What are the people telling you?
Well, so one of the things, and I take a very numbers approach to this. And so I'm not beating up on Israel. In fact, what I've been giving them was advice, which is like, okay, guys, you had a good run, but time to pump the brakes a little bit. You're starting to cause problems. And all of this stuff over the last 2 months about like trying to purity test the right and kick people out and cancel Tucker Carlson and change the head of the Heritage Foundation and go after J.D. Vance. None of this stuff was beneficial, and I don't think any of it helped. But we have a tracking question that's, hey, just generally speaking, do you support Israel or Palestine more? And Israel was plus 42 in October of 2027, and they're down to, I think, plus 7 the last time we asked, so almost a complete collapse. And among the Zoomers, it's less than 20% say Israel in that situation. So now, like, I think Ukraine's different because Putin has been vilified for decades. People really, really hate that guy. And then when he went ahead and invaded, it was an affront. It was an affront to, like, I guess, Western, sovereignty, right? Like he's basically invading a quasi NATO state or whatever. Like obviously, I think he should have been talked to, and I think the Biden administration probably wanted that conflict. I don't know, right? Like whatever happened there. But Democrats were really whipped into a froth over this whole thing, and it became a cause celeb for them. And so there was an aspect of psychological operations that are really pushing that up. And I also think when you look at Taiwan and China, people know that China is an existential enemy. When we ask people to stack rank their most, feared foreign enemies, China is the top, followed by Russia. But what's kind of interesting is that if you add Republican and Democrat Party, the number one enemy facing America is the Democrat Party, followed by China, followed by the Republican Party. So there's this aspect of Ukraine was egregious. It's brutal. People don't mind. I mean, they do, but not as much mind giving money to Ukraine. Israel's got its stuff kind of sorted, and we had a really tough time for a decade in Iraq. And so I think there's an aspect of there aren't any current actually, if there's a psychological operation going on at all, it's like pro-Palestinian ethnic cleansing stuff, which has been hurting Israel's public opinion. It really has. And so that it's just people ask why, like, why am I getting this and not what I wanted? And, you never know, like, there are people connecting the dots with this to Epstein, or people actually polling about, or do they care about like AIPAC? Like these are things that are like really tough to dig into. But I think increasingly with how free the internet is and how questioning, let's just say, under 40 voters are, that there will be increasing litmus tests about priorities and where politicians place them. I think this generation is a truffle pig for inauthenticity. Somebody coined that 100%. And so when you have Republicans who aren't governing and then they send a 20-person delegation over to the Wailing Wall, the optics are just horrifying, and they can't escape that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really does seem like there is a generational battle that's happening, and it needs to happen. I mean, it's just the reality of the world, really, as one generation exits political and cultural power, and another one starts to take that power. There's a lot of butting heads, but it really does seem like Gen Z versus Boomer is actually becoming even bigger than maybe Millennial versus Boomer. And it really does seem as though Gen X largely is being kind of skipped over when it comes to places of institutional power, of course, with some exceptions. So, I mean, I gave a speech a while back to a local group, and I talked a lot about how there's like a revolution happening among young people, whether we want it to or not. It's just happening. Right now the question is basically whether or not we're going to be looking at like Patriots 1776, or whether it's going to be like the Jacobins. And it really does seem like economic issues are one of the biggest driving factors. But I mean, as far as like watching what's happening with young men, young women, and of course comparing that to what's been happening and it's maybe being exacerbated in the Boomer generation, how would you start to describe what's going on with these phenomenon?
I spent a lot of time thinking about this, a lot of talk about here. And I'll just say there is a risk of increasing revolution or civil war. We asked the question, and the question's been in the high 20s, then it was in the mid 30s. And then during the Biden administration, we got 43% of America thinks a civil war is likely in the next couple of years. And the younger people have a higher signal. And actually under 40 Christians, I think it was 56% of them. And so there's an aspect of like these people kind of see the writing on the wall, and there are really high concerns about political violence in America as well. And I think just looking at it, though, where we're at, you said a revolution. There is a revolution going on. And I think, I don't know if this is something your audience knows about or not, but I think there's something going on called the fourth turning, which is basically the idea that throughout Western history, things come in like an undulating pattern of order, where you have a crisis and then it causes this vacuum of leadership that creates order. People step up and there's a cohesive society to build a new set of values to serve civilization for a while until it all falls apart again. And we're basically at the like fall apart and about to have a crisis phase. And what happens there is that people become there's a generational break between the people who built the values of the prior system and the people who see that those values no longer work, and they're looking to try and fill that vacuum and instill new institutions and new values around their own leadership. And so Israel again was like one of the first. I hate to keep going back to them, but it was just over the last 3 months. It's been one of the most salient polling topics, because 10 years ago there wouldn't be an age difference on that Israel question. There just wouldn't. This under 30s would be the same as the 65 and older. Now there's a massive age difference, and obviously the internet drives some of that. But what you're trying to increasingly seeing is that these boomer people who still run the government, they're 60% of elected representatives in Congress. They have these old things that I think most people perceive to be luxury beliefs. In my opinion, paleo traditional conservatism is a luxury belief now. Like, if you say free market capitalism is going to fix this, I disagree with you, because it's just going to be more corporatist, kleptocracy. And so we need, you see this like eschewing of all of these old norms and embracing like a different kind of ethics and culture. And so I think when old conservatives say, hey, you need to follow the Constitution and free market capitalism and, all of these institutions that they built and that have been served them well, like, we need to reform our social safety nets. Well, you guys built those social safety nets, and the younger generation is probably not even going to get them. And so what I think you see with the younger people is rebelling against the olds increasingly. And, there's your Nick Fuentes types and stuff like that. And then also, when they look at society, when they demand order, I think what they're asking for is a system that is ethical again. And so, for instance, I think they care less about stuff like the Constitution, because they say, well, society has no integrity. Obviously, it can't work. Well, let's restore integrity, and then we can get back to the Constitution. I really think that's like kind of like the subtext. These people want arrests more than anybody. These people are following the scandals more than anybody. These people like blowing up the freaking drug smugglers more than anybody. And so there's this young generation that's like, we want aggressive action, and we don't care if rules are broken. It was even almost 6 in 10 under 40 voters agreed with Trump's Napoleon quote that he who saves his country violates no laws. They wanted judges impeached. They wanted judges ignored. They want people arrested for the auto pen scandal, like over and over and over again. And if Trump doesn't give it to them, unfortunately, they're not going to vote Republican. They're going to vote for democratic socialism, because that's their default position. They think the system has failed. And so they say, like, let's at least raid the Treasury.
Yeah, man, there's just so many threads here. I think something that's really occurring a lot in the faith-based arena is that a lot of young individuals, because the culture has fallen apart so drastically, they're looking back to not the faith of their grandparents, but the faith of their great grandparents. They're looking back further and further into history to kind of get an idea of like, where do we come from? Where did this all go wrong? Because I think a lot of it is because, and this is maybe me just spitballing here, it seems as though the older generation, to your point, is wanting to rah the Constitution more, free markets more, but obviously that hasn't worked, because we've lost our country throughout the life of the baby boomers, essentially. And so I think so many in the under 30 crowd, maybe even under 40 crowd as well, they're looking much farther back into historical Christianity, and they're finding things like the Reformed tradition, which of course is historically not very Zionist in nature. So I think that individuals who are Christian even are finding justification to no longer need to support Israel, whereas the prior generation, I think it was very much embedded in them that a Christian supports Israel. And I think that some out of context verses were oftentimes used to really push that. So there was a religious reason behind Israel beyond just, like you said, a luxury belief. When the baby boomers had it better financially, of course, they can justify the idea of spending some of our tax dollars to go off and fight monsters abroad, so to speak. But of course, we see now the Constitution is beaten up. It's tattered. It is not sufficient, or at least that's how the younger generation would view it. I don't want to necessarily speak for myself here, just kind of speaking broadly. But I did an episode quite a while back, on whether or not the Constitution is dead, because there was a whole debate happening at this time on the right of whether or not the Constitution was dead, and the critics were chastising the individuals who were saying the Constitution was dead, and they weren't realizing that the individuals saying that were not praising the fact that it's dead; they were lamenting it. And so these individuals are lamenting that the Constitution is dead. What do we do now? And really, my personal opinion on the matter is that the Constitution is not dead, but it is very beaten up. It may be on life support. But of course, it was, I believe it was John Adams who said that the Constitution is only adequate for a moral, religious people.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, do we have a moral and religious population? Of course, I would submit that the audience would probably all agree with me. No, we do not.
No, we don't.
Is the Constitution sufficient then? Well, according to the people that wrote it, no.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I wouldn't even single out the Constitution. I would say basically every institution has been corrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the Constitution. What about the church? I think the church has been corrupted too. And it's these things happen. Corruptions happen to empires. It's happened in the past. And how do you fix that? Well, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of leadership. It takes a lot of risk. It takes a lot of change. And I think we honestly need that, because I think our time is expiring. I mean, you just look at what happens to the dollar. We're one economic hard landing, probably away from youth uprising. I don't know. That's what's happening in other countries, right? We have an 17% youth unemployment rating by my numbers, under 30 voters. And I think everybody can agree that some aspects of the economy are grinding to a halt. It's certainly hollowed out. I would put myself at the dividing line. Everybody above me thinks one way and below me thinks a different way. And I think the people below me, it's basically at live in the pods and eat the bugs is basically where it's at. And the people above me have no idea. And I was right on the line where I basically got shoved out of corporate America because I was too white, and my whole career got imploded because of that. And so I just look at that and I say, all right, well, the dead wood needs to be cleared away, obviously. It's going to happen in Congress too, because in 10 years, it's going to flip from 60% boomer to 60% millennial and Gen Z. A lot of wealth is going to transfer. The economy is only going to get more concentrated unless there's major changes. So we're going towards some kind of friction, whether it's a revolution or civil war, it's hard to say. Now, I think the church has a role, but everybody's oh, well, Christianity can solve this. It's yes. In my opinion, Christianity is the right way that you can trust an elected representative to go to DC and actually put your interests first. I don't think there's any other competing value system where you can be relatively certain that we have enough trust in our system for it to work. But unfortunately, I don't think you can just snap your fingers and make a revival, because right. I think that is pull, not push. And I think that the Christianity has to have the right message for people. And that's where I think it's failing. And I've done a lot of polling on this. If you were just to take a political litmus test in order to measure the signal of how homogenous a worldview is among religious groups, you could do something like, hey, Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, who is most similar to your views on abortion? And religion should inform your answer to that. It really should. You know what I mean? It's the abortion's not in the Bible, but the principles are. It's probably a pretty clear answer, right? Well, the people who are most sure and secure in their worldview are atheists, because they say Kamala Harris by 80 points. Wow. So it's what is the point? You know what I mean? The people who don't go to church are the least confused about their answer to that question. Now, number 2 is evangelical Christians, and then it's Trump by 30 points. But if you identify as a Protestant, it's a complete wash. Flip a coin, and that's what your worldview on abortion is. And it's obviously because people, that religion has become about accepting everything and not about repentance and not about actual worldviews and applying the Bible to your daily situation. And it's going to die. I mean, it's aging out. Well, that's kind of the cool thing, is that under 30s aren't very religious, but the ones who are Catholic. Mostly Protestantism is dying under 30. It's less than 20% ID. But I like that blows my mind. We had another one that's pretty wild. We asked again about abortion. We asked the question: should the church get more involved in politics or stay out of politics? And then we asked, are you pro-choice or pro-life? And so the people who said that the church should be more involved in politics were pro-life by 30 points. And the people who said the church should stay out of politics were pro-choice by 40. So there are people who literally conform their religion around their own political worldview because it's a holy war versus this, like basically, I think people who are objective thinking, justice coded, disagreeable people who are fed up versus this like atheistic, leftist, anti-Trump monoculture. And that's the holy war. And that's what's playing out when everybody who cheers for a leftist that gets punched by an ICE officer is one of those people, right? And there are a lot of them are Christian. You know what I'm saying? And then a lot of the people protesting at No Kings rallies are also Christians too, but like the church probably has a flag out front with a rainbow on it, you know?
Right.
So I would love for Christianity to step in here, but I think even your best evangelical pastors are going to be like, well, we just need to do more biblical-based sermons and study the Bible. And it's like, yeah, okay, I agree with you. But if the Bible can't look around and call out the evil around us right now, you know, like what? Like, why can't? And I've had fights with pastors. Like, you can't stand in the pulpit and point your finger and say that's evil. Like, people are confused. Like, people just saw their neighbors cheering for Charlie Kirk's assassination, and it's people that go to this church. And I asked people on Twitter. I did a Twitter poll. I said, if you go to a mainline denomination, did your pastor mention Charlie Kirk in the 2 weeks following the assassination? And it was like some ridiculous 60-ish% said no. I mean, like, what's the point?
Yeah, there was definitely in the online Christian space a whole debate going on about whether or not it was acceptable to actually leave a church over your pastor not mentioning Charlie Kirk. And you know, I would say that does not need to be the only litmus test. You know, if they're faithfully preaching the word, you can stay at that church. But I do think it is certainly a valid concern if your pastor did not. I mean, I know. You know, James White, he's a well-known Christian apologist, and he's done a lot of good for the church. So I certainly don't want to dishonor someone I consider to be, you know, like an elder in the faith. But I do know that he was all concerned that so many individuals were putting that as a litmus test. But at the end of the day, you know, James White, I think the thing that he is forgetting, and men like him are forgetting, is that it's not just that Charlie Kirk was well known and was assassinated. People saw the assassination. You know, so many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people actually watched the moment that bullet hit his neck. And I mean, I'm sure you saw the video. I saw the video, you know, because when the news hit that Charlie Kirk was shot, everyone starts getting on their phone and jumping and saying, oh, shoot, because we don't know. Is he shot in the shoulder? Is it just a flesh wound? Is he fine? Everyone's looking for information. Then suddenly, boom, you get this close-up video of a horrific assassination of an individual that many people personally followed on their social medias and watched every day. And he was someone that shared their belief system. A lot of
he saved more people than most pastors do in their entire lifetime.
Absolutely. And you know, I have mentioned that specifically. There's roughly about 120 million people that listened in on his memorial service, where the gospel was proclaimed numerous times by multiple speakers. And when the gospel wasn't being proclaimed, there was worship music happening. And then, of course, for comparison's sake, the largest Billy Graham crusade, I looked it up, was about 3.2 million people. So I mean, the single largest Billy Graham crusade is not even anywhere close to being in the ballpark of how many people saw the gospel proclaimed at Charlie Kirk's memorial. So I mean, going out of that, what kind of polling did you see in wake of that?
Let me think back to Charlie Kirk. So right after Charlie Kirk, we did a set, and for the first time, inflation was dethroned as the number one concern among American people. It got up to 90%, at least somewhat concerned about political violence in America. And you have to understand that after Charlie Kirk, there was a really interesting like 1-2 punch. It was Irina Zarutska preceded Charlie Kirk by just a few days. The video coming out of her, and that was even without Charlie Kirk, that was already changing major minds. And so I think that all of this really just proceeded to like raise the temperature in America. People said that heated rhetoric was most to blame for his assassination. 46%, 28% availability of firearms. I think we had another one in there that I can't pull it up here, but it was a massive majority of people, like 60s or 70s, who said that Donald Trump's not doing enough to stop political violence in America. So that's a really big signal. That was a really huge one. And then, people agreed overwhelmingly with Trump that it's long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequences of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day. So for all of America to agree with Donald Trump that, the most hateful and despicable way possible, we're demonizing political opponents. Like, people want a better America. It's just like a disagreement kind of like how we do things and why. And you get these huge things where it's an opportunity to take drastic action. And I think objectively it wasn't. Or the Irina Zarutska thing was wild too, because we asked about capital punishment, and people overwhelmingly thought this guy was like guilty. Like, that wasn't even a question. But the last time we asked capital punishment a few years ago, it was plus 13, and it went up to plus 40, which is a massive move for a question like that, because that's getting into like, religious questions and more morality questions. It takes a lot for somebody to change their opinion on that. It was like 60 to 20%. It was like plus 70 among Republicans. People like wanted to see that guy fry. And I only think part of this is about Irina Zarutska. I think this is about, again, anger at the system. And the reason that everybody's so mad, and yet we still have, elections that are close as they are, election fraud aside, is it because people disagree with what aspects of the system are broken. But it is the system. That's what people have a problem with. And Trump is not really like attacking it. He kind of became the system in a way that it's just not, he's just not maximizing what he could do. And it's so sad because I think at this rate, Democrats pick up the Congress in November. I'm hearing that there are some anti-corruption cases being built for real bad things that are happening with some people in Trump's cabinet, and they're going to impeach Trump again. And it's like, if this was the best chance Republicans were ever going to get, they had a mandate. If a Republican mandate, they're supposed to be the responsible party, right? If a Republican mandate can't cure the ills of the government, it puts us in a tough spot. What are people going to do? It's going to change the path forward in some meaningful way. And already, again, I feel like we talked about it before. I feel like we're in a cold civil war because there are active criminal referrals, is my understanding, from the Oversight Committee to the Department of Justice for the sitting blue state governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, and probably Ellison. Like, I think there have been criminal referrals. So this is a guy that in some ways has been accused potentially of a crime. He's out there saying he's going to use the National Guard to remove federal agents who are investigating significant amount of fraud. That's like treasonous. And my advice is the iron fist has to come down. Like, if the ICE is going to get shoved out by the National Guard, then you got to declare the Insurrection Act. You got to get the military up there. And I look at it kind of like an accelerationist. And I think this is like Zoomer ethics too, or millennial ethics, right? Which is like, don't lie to me. If the system's corrupt, don't kick the can. Don't cover it up. Force it into the open so at least we all know how bad the system is. And I think Trump's administration has already done that a lot. But where are the arrests from the Department of Justice? I can only assume they're trying to really make their case. I would say, like, maybe these people don't even need to be convicted. Maybe you just need to try them and then get all the evidence out there and then show that the DC courts are going to let them all walk to delegitimize increasingly. I don't know. I hate to be like a radical, but I'm really worried because the Republican Party was supposed to be able to fix this stuff. And I don't know. I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the administration does point to where they've made multiple arrests of these, low level individuals. The issue is that it's. I mean, as you know better than anyone, it's a perceptions game. At the end of the day, the needle's not going to be moved by them saying, "Oh, well, we arrested 100 drug dealers on the streets of Philadelphia." That's not what people are begging for. And so at the end of the day, it's like, I don't want to take credit. It was Steve Dace I heard use the analogy. It's like chess. Like, you can't keep saying, well, we got this pawn and we got that pawn and we got that pawn. Like at some point, you got to get some rooks. You got to get some knights. You got to get the queen. And I mean, how's the game ultimately won? It's checkmate. And right now, the Trump administration, if they are doing all these things that you and I are hoping for just behind the scenes, I think they need to recognize that there's a perception problem.
Like, I know they are doing some of it. They absolutely 100% are, but it's not going to be enough. Like, it clearly is just not going to be enough. And I'll give you an example. The FBI, right? Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, I guess, probably did some things, right? Like, they tweeted a lot, and they talked to Maria Bartiromo. They said some stuff, right? But it didn't do anything. So we just asked 3 or 4 weeks ago, agree or disagree, federal agencies like the FBI and CIA need major reform. And it was like 8 out of 10, including 83% of Trump voters said, yep, they still need reform. And that's really wild, because usually when a Republican gets in, then everybody trusts the government that's a Republican, and they don't at all now. Like, that's brand new. Almost 60% strongly agreed with that statement. And so whatever happened in the CIA and the FBI, nobody in America believes that Trump has fixed those things at all. And those are, in my opinion, pretty key to draining the swamp. And so it's like, I don't think people realize it yet, but one of his major promises to drain the swamp, which was a 70% position, is objectively is failed right now. Failed. Completely 100% failed. And you know what? I think people even would wait on the economics. If it was like, yo, these problems are big, it's going to take 5 years to fix. Here's the things we're doing. Tariffs are really going to work. We're deporting a lot of people. Just give us time, bro. It'll work. As long as people were getting arrested, I think that would be enough for Trump to be like on freaking Mount Rushmore. And we're not getting any of that. And it's like, he picked the wrong person. She's terrible. And 10 years, how are we in this position where, again, we're faced with the potential reality that Trump hired the wrong folks?
Yeah, that's very hard. Well, when it comes to the actual coalition, Trump really won by courting multiple people and putting together a really ragtag group. And so to some degree, like governing is always going to be a lot harder than actually winning the election. And we knew this, but it really seems like Maha was one of the big ones that put Trump over the finish line. And for the most part, it seems as though Maha has been getting a lot of victories. RFK Jr., if I recall, I believe it may have been Rich Barris that put out this straw poll at the America Fest that RFK Jr. was like one of the most popular cabinet members, and I think it's because he's one of the ones that's delivering the most. But the people that it seems to me as a novice that Trump's really lost the most are the libertarian individuals that crossed over and voted for him. And I think he probably lost a lot of them on the foreign stuff, probably starting from the bombing of Iran. We got kind of Elon Musk, Rogan, Theo Vaughn, kind of that male.
Yeah, I'll take that. Okay.
And
so here's the thing, like in November of 2024 in our polling, and I think our polling is better than the exit polls, which mainstream media, they suck. Trump got 42% of independent and crossover Democrat votes. And that's astronomically high. And there's a lot more Democrats than there are Republicans. They're higher propensity. They always turn out. I think they have unending fount of money and fraud in order to like get their 75 million vote bogey. But Trump was only able to do this, outperform any Republican ever by building this big tent coalition. Now, in the polls, I only have the demographics available to me, like party, ideology, age, education, those kinds of things, religion, we ask. So it's hard to see like what podcaster people listen to. But what was wild is that I've seen black Trump approval as high as 45%. It was above 40 for most of the first half of Trump's term. So he got a lot of black support. He got a lot of Hispanic support. He did better with the under 40 voters than any Republican basically ever has. And he, like I said, got up to a 60% job approval rating with the under 40s. He did pretty well with women. I think in our final polls, he was underwater like 5, 6, 7 points, and he was crushing it with men. But yeah, like he had a lot of people who are not your core Republican voter, but the national Republican House popular vote was pretty close to Trump's. And so because Trump was on the ticket, they gave Republicans a chance. And so the problem is that this is not at all about Republicanism, especially with the under 40 voters. So I asked a slew of polling questions specifically aimed at the under 40s. And these people, everybody says they're more conservative. They are not more conservative at all. The Trump voters, just the under 40 Trump voters, 3/4 of these people support nationalizing major industries. Almost 60% of them support excess wealth confiscation. They're split roughly 40 to 50% on whether the Trump voters would vote for a Democratic socialist. They are really weird. The conservatives under 40, like, basically want to give control to an advanced AI because they're so frustrated with the state of the government. So what these people, again, want is aggressive action, and they don't care about old customs or rules or limitations. And I think that they're going to fail for Trump. And when November comes around, Democrats are up 4 right now on the generic ballot, which isn't that bad, but it still means they're going to pick up seats, most likely. And then I think the gerrymandering war of attrition is basically like a dead heat right now. So it's going to be a knife fight. And unfortunately, what's going to happen is the Republicans, who are very bad at allocating capital, they're very bad at marketing, they have a very unsystematic, they have a complete asymmetrical like disadvantage on the get out the vote effort. And you're going to have basically people who trusted the Republicans because of Trump, who just throw their hands up and say, you know what, the couch is going to win this time. And so everybody is like slavishly looking at these registration numbers. And they're like, oh, Republican ID is going up and we're registering more people. And it's like, yeah, but it doesn't matter if they sit at home. It doesn't matter at all. Now, they're like, this isn't to say that the good things could not happen. Like, they could arrest the people at Act Blue. They should have already. Act Blue is going to raise like $2 billion just this year alone. They could, do more with the voter rolls. I heard that Trump's going to do an executive order to try and institute paper ballots. Like, there's a lot of positive things that could happen that could pull this election out at the last minute. But those should all be plans like C, D, E, F, and G. Plan A should be Republicans get elected and they pass good laws. And unfortunately, they're failing at that miserably.
Yeah, that's frustrating. Here in Tennessee, we've got 2 members of Congress running to replace Bill Lee as governor. We got Marsha Blackburn, who's, of course, by polling standards, she's most likely to win. But then you've also got John Rose as well from the House, and both these individuals, they're running for the governor's mansion. I assume because they're fed up with Congress. But I've been talking to some of the campaign individuals and telling them, like, the biggest challenge is going to be selling the voters on why they should elect you when you're in the Republican Congress that is is failing them so badly. Why should you now be the executive over the state of Tennessee if right now, by the voters' eyes, they just feel like the congressional Republicans are completely failing them?
Yeah, this time's different. Trust me, bro. It's not going to work. You know what I mean? And I think people are starting to realize how performative the Republican Party is. And again, maybe they'll get some good stuff passed in the reconciliation bills. But with how much Trump's been railing on them to nuke the filibuster and all this other stuff, like, it just, like, the optics don't even look good. Like, Trump's fighting his own party, and they should be working together. And listen, I laid this out to Trump. I said, listen, if you're only going to get 2 more passes at reconciliation, you have to show that Republicans can govern. And that means they have to get out and talk about these issues. They have to tell America what they're going to try and do, so like a new contract for America, and be very clear that we Republicans have a plan. We know that the government's corrupt and we're going to fix it. We know Americans' middle class is dead. We're going to fix it. It's going to take years, but next year we're going to give you this. And watch us as we put it into this bill. We're giving you this right now. We put it on a website. You could check it off. We gave it to you. That's the only thing I think that will really truly save Republicans, unless, again, Trump pulls one of these rabbits out of the hat that just is going to cause the Democrats to freak out. I mean, if he wins because they basically banned Dominion voting machines or whatever, like that might be a Pyrrhic victory. Let's just put it that way. But there's so many things they could do. We haven't gotten an election reform bill. We haven't gotten illegal immigration, changes. We haven't gotten new edits to the visas and all this other stuff. There's so many popular things that they could do, and they aren't going to e-verify. It's a no-brainer. We already have the program. Just mandate it for all the businesses, and you won't even have to have the ICE people getting protested at. It's just absolutely wild. So I don't know, again, the bar is really low. And what I'm starting to learn about the industry too is that it really does come down to money. With the Democrats, it's like laundered foreign NGO, like globalist money. And with the Republicans, it's your big businesses. There are your Club for Growth. There are the American for Prosperity and all these folks. And if you run as a new candidate, you have to go and you have to bend the knee. And they are still stuck in the policy of Mitt Romney. They think that low regulation, completely free markets, because the free market can regulate the economy better than the government can. And unfortunately, we don't have the independent and aggressive government that will hold those companies accountable. So it's not going to work. Like if we had libertarian free market economics right now, we would all be ruled by Google and Amazon. And we don't have that. And you know what we did? We have a really good antitrust person in the Department of Justice. And you know what happened is MAGA influencers sold out and tried to get her fired. And they've been blocking and tackling her because of Republican, lobbyists. And it's just got to be burned down. I mean, in Minecraft, that's what's going to happen. And, Trump could have been that person.
Yeah. Well, it's heavy to think of these things, but also if we don't face reality, then nothing's ever going to change. So let's maybe just end on a fun one, just for a positive note. So, what are you most optimistic about when it comes to 2026?
You started this interview saying, "Well, you're not a black pillar." It's like maybe you got me. Like it's been a long day. I'm kind of exhausted. Like maybe. So what am I most optimistic about? Well, I hope we get more of this new Trump for sure. And I really do think they're listening to my advice. And I think that, again, if the Republicans can't really govern in a way that's going to wow people, that the blue state gift of just unending fraud, it's going to be the gift that keeps on giving. Like they should be rating, can you imagine Gavin Newsom trying to run for governor when every federal agency is rating California and uncovering $300 billion worth of fraud or whatever it is? That would be hilarious. And I think they could do it. I mean, I think we have the right level of people. We have the, right leadership. It wouldn't be that hard. I would love to see the Insurrection Act. I would love to see that. And, I don't know. I think this year is going to happen really fast, though. I think we're going to see some desperation out of some folks. So that's always great because public opinion changes fast. I just want something to happen because Trump approval hasn't changed in like a month. So I'm starting to get bored.
Yeah. Your job's getting real boring.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Mark, and giving us, an update on where things are at with the people. I really appreciate you trying to keep your finger on the pulse. Where can people go to follow you and keep up with everything that you're putting out? This has been a summation of everything, and the country's in a tough spot. And so I'm telling you all the hair on the country right now, but on a daily basis, there is good news. Again, the Maduro thing was excellent. We just did a YouTube video about that today. Rasmussen_poll on YouTube, Rasmussen_rewind. We're at Twitter at Honest Pollster and Instagram now. We just started that too. We put our little short clips out. So
people can come make fun of me being a boomer on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining, Mark. And thank you, listener, for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys listening. Please feel free to share this far and wide. You can follow me on X at Forge and A. Really appreciate it, and appreciate you guys supporting the show. So we'll see you next time.